I'm going to be talking about how to become a licensed clinical therapist, more specifically, a licensed clinical social worker. Hello and welcome back to my channel, Mental Health with Melissa. I'm Melissa. I'm a licensed clinical therapist based in California. You know the drill. Before we get started, please don't forget to hit the beloved subscribe, like, notification bell so that I can get more content out to you. I post videos every single Wednesday and Sunday. So please hit that subscribe button. Subscribing to my channel and sharing my content really helps me get more mental health information out there to our communities of color and further breaks down that stigma to a lot of our communities of color, like I mentioned, and also gives more information to those that are interested in mental health professions. Today, I'm going to be talking about how to become a licensed clinical therapist, more specifically, a licensed clinical social worker. I'm going to start from the very beginning, step by step, from what schooling and types of educational background you're going to need, all the way up to supervision hours, submitting specific documentation, to sitting for that exam, and taking it all from start to middle to finish. I personally haven't really seen any YouTube videos that really zone in on the specific licensed clinical social work profession. There are plenty of videos out there if you're interested about what the differences are between all the different types of mental health professions, such as LCSW, LPC, LMH, PsyD, PhD, all of that stuff. And today we're gonna hone in a little bit and focus on the LCSW. So we'll start by giving a little bit of background information about what you can do with an LCSW and what an LCSW is. So the LCSW stands for Licensed Clinical Social Worker. And as a licensed clinical social worker, you are a licensed clinical therapist. So that means that you can diagnose your clients with a mental health disorder that is listed in the well-known DSM-5. Now, again, like I mentioned, there are several other providers out there. The difference with the LCSW really is some of the training that goes into the classes and the educational experience. But later on, the test and a lot of the licensing, of the supervision and collecting hours is very similar to those other mental health licensed clinical providers. So if you're looking for a profession that really involves a biopsychosocial approach, which means that with the individuals that we're working with, we really assess and approach them from assessing their environment, their social support or lack thereof, and any medical concerns that they may have, so that we can refer to medical professionals as that is out of our scope of practice. So what I really like about having my LCSW is that I was really trained, again, around humanitarian work when I was in grad school. And so a majority of my focus and my training in grad school in the mental health and behavioral health type of education was on how to assist and assess my clients based on those three main approaches, the bio, psycho, and social. Now, I know with some of the other mental health clinicians, they approach things more from a psychological standpoint, or I know that with MFTs, marriage and family therapists, they have a lot of knowledge base and practice around family systems and couple systems. I can't talk too much on those because I'm not an MFT and I'm not an LPC or a LMH or any of those other ones that I talked about. As I mentioned before, I am in school. I am getting my PhD in psychology, but again, my focus in my license is in clinical social work. So let's get into the steps now. The first step that you're going to want to take if you're interested in becoming a licensed clinical social worker or a licensed clinical therapist with an emphasis in social work is to get your bachelor's degree. Now, it really does not matter what degree that you get when you get your bachelor's degree. It's called a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree, and that's an undergraduate degree. So for a lot of people, after you graduate high school, you either go to a four-year college, which gives you the bachelor's degree, or you can go to a community or city college, which you can get an associate's degree and then transfer to a four-year college and get your bachelor's degree and get to spend less amount of time there. So again, you do not need to take any specific type of class to prepare you to become a licensed clinical social work if we're talking about your undergraduate bachelor's degree. Now, would it be helpful to take something in the social science, for example, a bachelor's degree in psychology or sociology, or maybe even communications? Certainly, that definitely will help. It won't hurt, because then you'll get to learn a lot more of the foundations and those 101 courses like Psychology 101, Social 101, etc. Now, after you get your bachelor's degree, you're going to want to apply for a graduate program. Now, again, because we're talking about an LCSW, you're going to need to apply to a graduate program that offers an MSW. MSW stands for Masters of Social Work. Now, what you're going to want to do is, when you're approaching the end of your senior year in your undergrad program, that's going to be the ideal time to start applying to MSW programs. So what you're going to need for that is your official transcript from your undergraduate degree program, and you're going to need some sort of personal statement, and you're going to need, depending on the graduate school that you apply to, 3 letters of recommendation from either professors in undergraduate classes or internships that you've been at. Every MSW school and program has different requirements for their admissions criteria for the MSW program. Personally, I applied to 3 MSW programs. I applied to the University of Southern California, UW, which is University of Washington in Seattle, and also the University of Chicago in Chicago, Illinois, School of Social Sciences. I ended up going to USC, the University of Southern California, and what they required were, again, the letters of recommendation, the personal statement, the official transcript, and I believe those are the 3 main things. But again, every year they may change, and every school requires different admissions criteria. And they also, some may have an interview before you're officially accepted, and some may not. So the rule of thumb is to maybe find 3 or 4 that you research that you really like and find a strong connection to, because you're going to be spending time there, and applying to all of them, so that if you don't get into some of them, hopefully there's a chance that one of them will accept you. So once you're in, these MSW programs are typically on average 2-year programs. Now that's if you're doing it full time. If you do it part-time, that may definitely increase the amount of years or time that you spend in that MSW program. But for the most part, they're usually 2 years if you do it full time. When I was in my MSW program, I spent 2 years in it, and I was committed to it, and I was able to get it done. So when you do that, there are a lot of different classes, and again, the academia really focuses on humanitarian work and that person-centered care approach with the biopsychosocial focus. So the classes that I took had a lot to do with individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and theory classes and addiction classes. So we really focus on a general understanding of behavioral health. Now, after you graduate with your MSW, you're going to need to get some real world experience. So when you're in your internship, that really counts towards getting your feet wet in terms of providing clinical services. But when you actually graduate your program, you're going to need to accrue a certain number of hours. And I don't want to say how many hours that is, because for each state, it's different, the amount of hours that you need to be eligible to sit for your exam. Me personally, in California, years ago, it was approximately 3,200 hours. And so I actually submitted way more hours than 3,200. But what you have to do at that point is you first have to register for the Board of Behavioral Sciences or for your social work board in your state. In California, it's called the Board of Behavioral Sciences, or the BBS, and you submit an application which is to become an associate clinical social worker. So once you do that, you will get a number back to you in the mail of what associate clinical social work number is. And once you get that, you're going to need to have a full-time job that you're providing some sort of clinical care to, because you will then have to find a licensed clinical social worker that has had their LCSW for over 2 years and has taken the CEUs to become a clinical supervisor and is able to and is willing to provide you supervision hours. That person will need to meet with you face to face, whether that be on the video or in person, for 1 hour a week to provide you 40 hours of hours that you can collect and put on your application to submit to the BBS. So we're getting a little bit fast here and a little bit ahead of ourselves. So I'm going to slow down. So when you get that number, after you apply for your BBS number and you get that number, the ASW number, you're going to get a form that is called, I believe, the clinical supervision agreement form. And again, for every state, it may be different. And once you identify your clinical supervisor at your place of work, you're going to want to complete that agreement form with them. And then once you do that, you're going to keep that for your safekeeping, and you're going to submit it with your application after you collect all the amount of hours. Now, I guess I should have said this from the beginning, but just as a disclaimer, I am not the spokesperson for the LCSW exams or the person that you should go to for all of the documents that you need to submit, but rather I am just laying out some of the steps in general of how to become an LCSW.
You're going to want to defer to your state's guidelines
and go to your BBS website or whatever website that may be for your state, and make sure that all of the required documents and the requirements in general are listed on there, and talk to somebody from that board if you need to. Okay, so after you are able to get your clinical supervisor, that's when the clinical supervision begins. So again, like I said, you're going to need to meet with them for about 1 hour every single week, and that person is going to sign off on your hours. Now, in the state of California, I'm not sure about other states, like I said, there isn't a specific form that you need to log their hours, but obviously it is helpful if you do that. So you're going to want to keep a log. I think that there is one on the BBS website, but if you're able to do one yourself on Excel, it's going to be really important that you remember all the times that you met with your clinical supervisor and that you have a log of that, so that if there's any discrepancy, you can always go back and remember that you met with your clinical supervisor that week. Now, after you have accumulated all those hours, and another question that I actually get quite a lot is, can you have more than one clinical supervisor? Not at one time, but you can have different clinical supervisors at different points in time. Like, for example, I had a few different clinical supervisors, but I was able to kind of take all of the hours that I had with each of them and then apply it towards my hours. So after you've accumulated all the required hours, supervision hours for your state regulations, for your specific state board, then you are going to want to go onto that state board website and make sure that you complete all of the required documents. And that means that you're going to have all of your clinical supervisors or whoever your clinical supervisor was sign off on a lot of your hours on the paperwork. So once you're able to compile all of that information, you submit it to your board and you wait. And there is a fine that you pay. I guess I shouldn't say fine. There is a fee that you pay. And usually it's around like $100, I believe. But again, it really depends on your state. And so you submit that and you wait. And I think that processing times may really, again, differ from state to state. So when you do get the response from your board, they basically tell you yay or nay. If they say yay, then that means that you can move forward with contacting your local testing site to take the test. Or if they say nay, then they will give you information as to why your application was denied to sit for the exam. Sometimes there are mistakes or errors on the application, so they'll send that back, or they'll say something's missing and you'll have to send that. And you really have to respond about what the discrepancy was, and they won't approve you to take the test until you're able to do that. Okay, so once they say yes and you are able to get approval to sit for your exam, they're going to give you a list of testing sites, and you're going to want to contact your local testing site and set up an appointment. At that point, I would recommend starting the process of studying. And just to kind of get your feet wet, I would take a look at my video, the 3 things that you need to know to pass your LCSW exam. And I'll link it below down in the description box below, because I think that it's really helpful. It really helped me, and I think it helps a lot of other people. After studying and really making sure you adhere to those 3 tips that I mentioned, then you are going to sit for your exam. And the exam is really time consuming, so make sure you prepare. But after that, hopefully you pass, and when you do, you are then considered a LCSW. Yay! And so at that point, you are able to be a licensed clinical provider in your given state of practice, and that means you can officially diagnose. So if you haven't heard of the DSM, you're going to want to take a look, because the test also includes questions about diagnoses, all of that stuff. You're going to really want to get to know criteria for certain diagnoses, and when you become an LCSW, you are eligible to apply to jobs to become a therapist, where again, you can provide therapy and diagnose. So I believe that is it in a nutshell. I talked really fast because I wanted to make sure that I could get through a lot of the information. I hope that helped. If you have any questions at all, please don't forget to leave them in the comment section below. I really enjoyed filming this video, and if you have any other video requests, then feel free to comment below. But until next time, you know the drill, managing mental health matters.